not have too many slides. So with that, welcome Kim Roy, and we'll start the recording.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me this evening. It's my pleasure to be here, as I do love sharing my knowledge of radon with others. Doing it without a slideshow is new to me, so here we go. And I usually talk for a lot longer, so I'm gonna condense it. So I'm not sure what everyone knows about radon, but I'm gonna give you a brief explanation of what it is. Radon is a radioactive noble gas. It's caused by the breakdown of uranium in soil. So it's naturally occurring in the soil, and it enters our homes through cracks in foundations, openings near floor joists, opening near your sump pit, or any other tiny opening. Once it becomes airborne, you inhale it, and it can stick to your lung tissue and actually damages the lung tissue, which then can cause lung cancer over long-term exposure. So every house is going to have a measurable amount of radon in it. There are some action levels. So Health Canada's action level is 200 becquerels per cubic meter, while the World Health Organization's is 100 becquerels per cubic meter. So obviously, you want your levels in your home to be as close to zero as possible to eliminate that risk. So all houses built after November 1st of 2014 had to have a radon rough-in system put in, which is in accordance with the new code changes that came into effect, because radon's being talked about more and more, and we're trying to, they're trying to prevent radon from entering homes and make it more easily accessible for mitigation purposes. So in a house built in that year, at least in 2015, all you're going to see in the basement is a stubbed up piece of PVC or ABS, and it'll be capped off. It'll say radon rough-in in it. And it's just, that doesn't mean that the problem is solved. It just means that the system is there and ready to be connected to and completed should you require it. So Health Canada recommends long-term testing during the heating season. So right now, during these winter months is prime time. 91 days is the best way to test. So a long-term test is a small little device placed in the lowest lived-in level, so usually the basement. It takes readings and then it's sent away to the lab. The lab analyzes those results and it gives you the overall radon reading. Something else that the Canadian National Radon Proficiency Program adopted is I can perform a real estate transaction guideline assessment. So, in Debbie's situation where she's a realtor, if somebody's looking to buy a house and they want to have their house tested, I can come in and do that over 96 hours, but I also tell them to follow up with that long-term test, because that's the highest accuracy. Radon fluctuates minute by minute, day by day, depending on occupancy use of the home too. So, and then as Debbie said, radon levels in a city, for instance, you guys are very, very close to each other in Edmonton, in a lot of neighborhoods. And so Debbie's house could test at 50 becquerels per cubic meter, and the neighboring house could test at 500. So there's a lot of variables involved there as well. Mitigation, should you require mitigation? Mitigation is a relatively easy process and should be done by a certified professional because they are highly trained in this, and they know they do a lot of pre-diagnostic testing to make sure that they're going to be using the right fan size, and they're going to be putting it in their most, the best area of the home. So mitigation used to be about $1,500 to $2,500. I'm not sure if that's gone up now or not, since everything else has. So it doesn't matter if the house is already roughed in or not. It's usually still the same amount of money to get it completed. And all it is if that system, the rough-in, is not there, they basically bore a hole into the concrete floor, into the basement, and then they attach this pipe, and then a radon fan is attached to that. So what happens is the radon gas is being sucked from below the slab, and then it's being expelled outside. And once it's in the outside air, it just dissipates into the air. That's basically the most condensed version that I've ever done. And I'm trying to think if I should go back and go any further into anything else. I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of questions. So I'm not sure, Dilini, if you want me to leave it there for now. You're still on mute.
Thank you. I should know by 3 years of Zoom, but thank you. I think we're still waiting for the second speaker. Leah, are you on? No? Okay, so you have more time. I'm not
Okay.
sure what happened to Leah.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of where I should go with this.
So do you want to explain to them what becquerels are and the units of?
Oh, not sure that I'm going to be that good at explaining that.
That's okay. That's okay. Any questions thus far?
I think it would be good to explain like who is more apt, a newer house, an older house. I think, Kim, from what I understand, the newer houses are the ones that are most susceptible because they're more airtight.
Yes.
And the homes are probably less likely to have radon.
So great point. Thank you for that, Debbie. Yes. So the head researcher that we have working for the radon researcher is in University of Calgary, Dr. Godarzi, and their research shows that the newer houses are testing a lot higher, and it's for that exact reason, is because they're newer and we're trying to create them so airtight and so energy efficient that it's actually causing a lot of other health concerns. So if you have a whole bunch of new windows in a home, you have all these high efficiency furnaces and water heaters. The house is created so airtight that once that radon gas is in there, it has no way to escape. I just read something today stating, again, this is Dr. Godarzi stating this, that it is said that lung cancer is going to be the primary leading cause of cancer in 2023, which is a terrifying statistic, and in my opinion, very preventable on a lot of areas. Obviously, people who smoke shouldn't smoke, and then sorry to anyone who does. And then radon, having your house tested for radon, and if it does test high, then reducing those levels. The mitigation is extremely effective when done properly by a professional as well. So I have a lot of colleagues in different provinces, for instance, who've had radon levels of 5,000 brought down to like 50. So it's quite amazing the things that can be done with all of the fancy technology.
So
Kim, how do we apply to test?
Sorry, I'm just gonna say, if you don't mind, just use your raise hand icon under reactions, so we don't have too many people asking at the same time. But I'll take the speaker's prerogative or facilitator's prerogative to say, Kim, are you also putting your data with Dr. Godarzi at the Cummings School of Medicine in Calgary?
Unfortunately not. I tried to talk to him about that, and he won't accept our data that we exactly.
Okay.
That's right.
We'll talk offline. We'll talk offline on that. So he has done work with the Lung Association. I'll see if Jamie has joined now.
I just messaged her. Her link wasn't working, so I'm hoping I sent her the link and she can get on there.
Oh, I see her on the list now. Thank you.
Perfect.
But
Yeah.
before we get to Jamie, if there's one or two questions. By the way, I'll clarify, lung cancer has been the #1 cause of cancer leading to death out of all cancers for the last 20 years, men and women. So it's not a new thing.
Wow.
And it's not just cigarette smoking and cannabis smoking. There's other factors. Some of you are familiar with asbestos and radon, big issue. So I'm going to hold some questions, but I think it's Cam who's been patiently waiting. So go for it, Cam.
Thank you, Dilini. How do I get my home tested?
You bet. You can actually, so I have it on my website, but it's basically the exact same thing as the Lung Association of Alberta. So that would be where I would head. The Lung Association of Alberta sends you, I shouldn't say this, but I work with the one in Saskatchewan because I know them, and they send the test kit directly to you. So Jamie will probably be able to answer that question better than me, but That's where I would go. It's like a $65 test kit, gets sent to your house, explains to you how to test and where to place the device. It's basically foolproof.
Thank you. And Dawn, Terry?
Thanks very much. We had our home tested in 2018. And I am wondering how often, what's the frequency of testing? Every 5 years?
Yeah, so they're saying every 5 years, or if you do major renovations. So if you were to, put an addition onto your home or change windows and doors, those types of things will cause a big significant change. So every 5 years or after major renovations.
Our, just out of interest, our concentration rate was 186.
Okay.
So below the 200, but significantly higher than the WHO guideline.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll maybe have it done again soon. Thanks.
And Samantha, last question before I introduce Jamie. Go for it, Samantha. Okay, Samantha's probably off for a bit. Yes? Are you there, Parker? Okay. Anyway, I guess we'll go on. Jamie, are you here? Do you want to open your video? And I'll introduce you. I thought I saw
There we
her.
go.
Oh,
Hi, Dilini.
lovely. Hi, Jamie.
Apologies for the delay. I clicked the original link in the email and it kept saying the meeting hadn't started yet. So I thought the meeting, maybe I had the timing wrong, but
Well,
Kim has figured that out. So thank you, Kim.
no worries, and thanks for joining, Jamie.
Not at all.
So I'm
my
going
name
to
is-
introduce you,
Sure.
okay, and then I will have you talk for about 5 to 8 minutes
Mhm.
and see if people have questions for you or Kim. So for those who may not know Jamie, she's Jamie Happy is an alumnus of the University of Alberta, having her BSc in molecular biology here, and she's an experienced healthcare and science professional. And she said now the health promotions coordinator for the Alberta Lung Association for how many months or years, Jamie?
So I'm fairly new to the role. I started in August. Right now I am managing our health promotions portfolio. So in addition to Radon, it's pediatric CPAP, CPAP recycling, our
Okay,
asthma aero chamber program,
thank you.
our patient
Okay.
support groups. Yeah.
So that's her connection with the Alberta Lung Association, and I reached out to her boss, I guess, Lee Allard, to say,
Yeah.
hey, I know you guys did a study a few years ago across Alberta, and Lee connected me with Jamie. So she's an Edmontonian by birth. She enjoys attending the different festivals year round in her spare time. And as far as the Lung Association, since 1939, it has championed lung health in Alberta by supporting patients, research, advocacy, and education. Excuse me. There are over 40 lung diseases, and 1 in 5 Albertans have a lung disease. Educating and raising awareness about the risks of radon to encourage home testing is one of the many programs the ALA offers. Saving lungs saves lives. So that's her bio and introduction. Welcome, Jamie, and it's your turn now.
Thank you. So thank you for the introduction, Dilini. As she said, I'm from the Alberta Lung. In 2012, we did a study. Oh, sorry, I think I just froze there for a second.
Maybe just start again.
Just going to check my connection really quickly because I seem to be freezing. Okay, there we go. So in 2012, we contributed data sets to a cross-Canada radon survey by Health Canada. And it showed that 1 in 8 Canadian households exceed the 200 becquerels per square meter limit. Becquerel is how we measure radiation. And because radon is a breakdown of uranium in the soil, it's considered a radioactive gas. 1,500 out of 14,000 Albertan households participated, so it was quite a low number. And that was mostly concentrated in the Calgary and Southern Alberta region. So we used those data sets again for a 2016 review with Dr. Godarzi of the University of Calgary. South and West Central Alberta tended toward higher levels in that data set. Unfortunately, the greater Edmonton area has no review yet, but we're hoping to get on that pretty soon. We're just going to be showing some more data and hopefully getting permission to do an Alberta study as well. The data that we have so far compiled shows that radon is relatively unknown in Alberta. And we really need a new province-wide radon study on the differences, because your soil type can determine if you have higher or lower levels. For example, the type of soil, if you have, say, granite soil or a clay type soil, something that's solid, it'll slow down the movement of radon, so you can have lower levels. Whereas if you have gravel or sand type soil, it's more porous, you'll have higher levels. And we do think that radon may be rising in Canada because permafrost in the Arctic is melting, which is releasing trapped radon. And newer construction tends to have higher levels because we have airtight basements now and higher ceilings, and the gas doesn't dissipate as quickly. One of our main projects right now is working to convince the Alberta government to create a radon support program, which will help with education as well as covering the cost of mitigation through a renovation tax credit. And are there any questions?
Thank you, Jamie. I put up your, I don't know if you had your flyer handy, so I put up your flyer.
I appreciate
for,
that.
Others to see, and I can put it up again if helpful, but just so we see a full window. I think there's a couple more questions. Cam or Wendy or Jan, is that you guys who have a question?
Thank you, Dilini. Why higher ceilings? Like, does that mean that the radon somehow is I don't understand why a room with a higher ceiling would have more problems with radon accumulation.
So one thing we've noticed with homes that have higher ceilings, increased square footage, so say a bungalow versus a two-story and airtight basements, is the gas doesn't dissipate as quickly because there's less venting, there's less airflow overall. So the gas has a chance to concentrate longer. And that's how we have noticed that the levels tend to be higher. It's not so much that there's more radon, it just concentrates more over time without having a chance to dissipate. I hope that answers your question.
So that's actually interesting. When we look at the climate, and I'll put up that screen again, in northern Alberta compared to southern Alberta, of course, we have a more severe climate. And when we talk about newer homes built to actually help with heating, we could be doing the opposite from a radon perspective.
Yes, so radon levels tend to be higher in the winter, especially in climates like ours, because we're opening doors and windows much less frequently. One theory about why southern Alberta and central western Alberta have higher levels is because of a different soil composition. The soil tends to lean a bit more towards gravel and sand and porous clay versus solid soils like granite, which is more common in Edmonton.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Now it's open forum for anyone who has questions. We made it a little longer because it seemed like there's even more interest in this than our topic last year. So we'll wait a few minutes. Oh, I see a question in the chat, for those who aren't on a laptop or desktop, there's a question from Peter. That Kim's answered in the chat. HRV can assist in some ways, but if the levels are significantly high, it will not do enough to reduce the levels without mitigation. Do you want to explain that? I don't see Peter's question. Yeah.
Yes. So Peter's question was, new houses are better sealed, but also have HRVs. Are these not effective at removing some of the radon? So I said HRVs definitely, which is taking fresh air from outside and bringing it into your home, which that's what an HRV is. So I've been told that if your levels were like 100, the HRV may be able to bring it down to like an 85 or something. You're not going to see if your levels are significantly higher, like over 200 or 350, probably unlikely that you're going to get radon levels brought close to zero at that point. So
Thank you. Peter, that answers you. And I think there's one other question in the chat. Samantha, I had the same question as Dawn regarding frequency of testing. Okay, that's answered. And another one in the chat from Elizabeth, if someone has lung issues, how can it be determined that the cause is radon? Well, that's a tough one. I'll pipe in after, but I'm going to leave it for the speakers.
Okay,
I
so
wish we could determine that.
yeah, right now it is, we don't have definitive answers as what is clearly a lung cancer condition that's caused by radon versus another factor. Right now, there's multiple biomarker studies that we are going to try and use to clearly denote a person's radon exposure correlates with their lung cancer. We do have some genetic signatures that we can utilize, but right now it is basically a very strong theory that radon is the reason that these people are higher risk for radon. Dilini, you might have a better answer for this, just because I'm not quite well versed in that sense.
So I think a big thing here is, and we have to do this a lot, whether it's respirologists or family docs, there's industrial hygienists who work in companies that monitor different environmental health issues. But taking a detailed occupational history is the number 1, 2, and 3 thing that a physician or nurse, healthcare worker can do and assist the patient in doing. It's so hard to go backwards. And although we talk about precision health biomarkers for some areas, looking at exposures from 30 years ago, etc., it's through a detailed history taking. And by the way, telehealth could never do that. That's what I'm putting that in, because I'm hearing more and more about telehealth for instead of family docs. And it just doesn't work the same way. Anyway, so that's a complex question, an important question. Lung cancer can have many factors, even a smoker versus a non-smoker. So there's old studies that have shown people who smoke cigarettes prior to the whole cannabis escalation. People who smoke cigarettes have an increased risk. People who have asbestos exposure have an increased risk. But if they have both, it's not just doubled, it's exponential, the risk of lung cancer. And if we use that same theory with radon and other factors leading to cancer, and there's genetic markers, as Jamie talked about, there's also genes that get turned on by certain factors. There's what's called promoter genes, etc. This is going into somewhat of, I think, Michael's area prior to his retirement. But nonetheless, it's much more of a complex issue than at a single time point, taking a detailed history. Yeah, that was a good question. Michael, I think you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. So I was just wondering if our speakers are of the opinion that, even if our house doesn't have any of the risk factors that you've outlined, is it a good idea to have our radon concentrations tested anyway?
Honestly, yes, because there's always more and more data. There's always more research being done. We're discovering new risk factors every year, it seems. So based on your household, it could be, you could have 200 becquerels and your neighbor could have 50 becquerels. It varies widely across Canada, even for the same neighborhood. So we like to recommend people test just in case, because you honestly never know until you do test. And it's pretty easy to test. It's like a 90-day test. It's just a good way to stay informed and in control of your own healthcare journey.
And so the best way to test is to get a kit from one of the lung associations, or to have a contractor come in and install something?
That's a good question. It really depends on what you want to get out of the testing. If you're in an area where there may not be a mitigation company available to you, or you have like an increased risk of lung conditions, or you have a pre-existing lung condition, then it may be better to have a kit mailed to you, which is what Alberta Lung does. If you are in an area where the radon levels are higher, then we would recommend going through a radon mitigation company.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
So we have a few questions in the chat, and I'm just going to ask people to read it out because not everyone is on a video device. So Peter, you had another question about air things. What's that mean?
Oh, so
Peter?
Air Things is a brand.
Oh.
So yeah, so it's a type of radon level monitor. It's similar to the kit, except this one is battery powered and it's continuous. Let me just see here. Average of 75 per year and hit peaks of 150. It really would depend on what your personal risk and your household's risk for lung conditions are. Canada has a different level as a limit than most of Europe, the US, and the WHO. The WHO actually sets their limit at 100 versus our 200. So if you are at a higher risk for a lung condition, or someone in your household is at risk or has a lung condition, then we recommend installing a radon pump, having mitigation done for anything over 125. That's actually a really good question.
Thank you, Peter. Peter, I'm going to get you to type in your email so we have a way to contact you after. You're not from Belgravia Community League, and we can send you some of our write-up summary of.
Okay.
Okay.
Just looking at the questions, it looks like Dawn had a very similar question at 116. So Dawn, that would be a really similar answer because your level is also over the 100 limit.
So we've answered Don McDonald. We have not answered Walter Dixon. Very good question here. With Belgravia and McKernan largely being built over the old shallow clay bottom McKernan Lake, should we expect high levels of radon in our homes?
Actually, a really good question. Without knowing the type of clay and the soil composition, I wouldn't be able to give you a definitive answer, but clay tends to be a bit more on the solid side. So depending on the home construction, you would probably have a slightly lower level.
So I can put my 2 cents worth here. So although we talk about different densities of the clay, Walter, are you in Belgravia or are you in Windsor Park, McKernan? Or you're not on audio? Or you can type it in. So a lot of the people who recently come up to say, hey, we've been tested, it's been in South Belgravia. And interesting, that's also where I live. And so a number of years ago, you might remember there were some major floods. So this water table we have with Prior McKernan Lake, which is not that long ago, 50, 60 years ago. People were skating maybe 60 years ago on McKernan Lake before houses were here. So there was a huge flood and the city had to install extra pumps to deal with future sudden rainstorms. People were actually canoeing in Belgravia. This is about 2 years after I moved here. So it might be more of an issue in certain parts of the, I don't know, of the community, but the clay bottom is something that's interesting. But thanks for looking at that, Jamie, and it'd be interesting if you find any more details on that specific issue.
Yeah.
Kim, any thoughts on that?
My personal thought is, like Jamie said, even though it's thought to be clay, which shouldn't, radon gas shouldn't pass through as easily. Even though whatever the soil is under the house, we still don't know. We don't know if it's going to be entering the home or not for many, many reasons. So the best thing to do is to test.
Thank you.
I just ordered one.
Oh, yay.
On that Saskatchewan lung or Alberta lung, or it took me to Saskatchewan
Oh,
lung.
so it's actually a partnership with Alberta Lung and Lung Saskatchewan. So that's probably why we use a laboratory in Saskatchewan, because they have a dedicated radon unit.
Yeah, 2 weeks, they should have it delivered here then. Good. I'll set it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. There's a few other questions. Before I address those, Debbie, you're still on, right? Another question I got asked by a couple of people who are not online. Does testing for radon change house prices? Debbie's also a real estate agent in her spare time. And does mitigation change the potential house value or concerns from buyers?
So because I'm in the home inspection world as well,
Awesome.
I believe that so I guess it depends how that's approached. When I'm at a house and I'm inspecting, I'm a very kind of non-alarmist. Like, I tell people exactly what it is. However, I tell them that it's a very fixable problem. So I think once people understand that radon, it's a real problem and it's there, it's 100% fixable, and those levels can be brought down to a safe level. So I don't think that should cause an issue with selling a home. And then when buying a home, if you're buying it with a mitigation system installed, it's going to depend on if the people know what that is and what it's for. So it definitely can add value to the right clients, I would say.
Thank you. Okay. Don McDonald, the library has a test kit. It is a bit of a wait, but that is what I used. And someone else, Leah, said, are the schools being tested?
So right now we are trying to educate schools about radon. They tend to be very hesitant to let us come in and test, simply because mitigation can sometimes have a financial barrier, and schools would be held liable. Right now we are trying to educate through students and through faculty, and hopefully if the government does bring about a mitigation support program, it would support schools too. So lots of advocacy, but no results just yet.
So Jamie, I think you or Kim had mentioned, maybe Jamie, in the flyer, right, so Jamie, that Manitoba and Saskatchewan have government funded programs province-wide.
They do, yes. So
and Alberta does not.
No, so BC and Ontario, I think, just announced that they'll also be having support systems. Alberta's lagging, but we're just continuing to push the government for the same, health equity access as other Canadians.
Yeah. So with elections coming around the corner, if anyone's so inclined, that's a great question to talk to your potential candidates.
Yeah. So we definitely encourage people to talk to the candidates, talk to your local MP about this issue, because if they're not aware of it, then it's not going to be something that's going to serve the constituents.
Leah Milton had a comment. Did I see this? So that everyone can hear it. I am from Eston, Saskatchewan. Leah, I thought you were from Malmo. Are you on? Do you want to? Okay, maybe she doesn't have audio. And the high school in the town had the highest level of radon in the study done by the Saskatchewan Occupational Health and Safety at that time, a long time ago. So I think it's more of a comment than a question. I remember in CBC News, the National, they had a few different sessions a couple years ago, pre-COVID, talking about Castlegar in southern BC having some of the highest levels in the country. Any comments on that, Kim or Amy? Maybe start with Kim on this one.
We have another fantastic doctor that works out there, and she was, so I was leading a team, I think it's called Take Action on Radon. And so there was a lot of, I think some of the testing that I had to funnel in was through Castlegar anyways. Yeah, it was a big deal up there. She's one of another kind of researcher that comes to the CARS conference every year. So yeah, they definitely have a lot more testing results from there, and they found out that the levels were really high.
So it's more awareness in that area.
Right.
To a champion locally.
I feel like Alberta, and Jamie can maybe understand this, that we are, man, we're trying, we're really trucking on here, but it's yeah, every other province seems to be well aware of radon, and Alberta's kind of, we're getting there.
Yeah, so with the advocacy, like you guys mentioned, the library program, that's another way we are raising awareness through a library rental program. The biggest barrier with getting results from the Alberta government seems to be a health equity lack of awareness. So, we encourage MLAs, we encourage MPs and the Albertan government to meet with us, to be educated, to have seminars. And so far they haven't really been very open-minded to that, but hopefully after the election that might change.
Thank you. Michael, you're on, right? There's a couple questions from Peter, which I was going to suggest. So the Belgravian newsletter puts usually a summary after these sessions. We could also, if it helps, was it him or no, Elizabeth had asked, where can we find links for information? That'll be the newsletter. Elizabeth, I think you're from Belgravia. Our website for the BCL, could that also, outside of the newsletter per se, can that also have a link to a couple websites?
So if you like, after this meeting, I can send those links to Dilini and she can share them with the league.
Thank you. But yeah, with the newsletter and possibly Elizabeth, Michael's the boss for that, to say yes or no for the website.
Well, if somebody wanted to write up a short summary with a few links to it, we could certainly put it in the newsletter or even send it out by email.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, stay tuned. Thank you. And Peter had asked a couple questions. Are radon levels typically only an issue in basements? Start with that for one of you, Kim or Jamie.
So unfortunately, no. It is a gas does rise. So it is an issue beyond the basement level. I'll let Kim explain further.
So typically the highest level of radon is going to be, the highest concentration will be in the basement because it's closest to the ground and the earth, and that's where radon is coming from. However, if you have your furnace is a forced air furnace, it's going to be blowing the air And it's going to be going up into the other levels anyways. So it's always recommended to test in the basement or the lowest lived in level. Sorry, I was already going to answer the second question.
Oh, that's okay. Maybe you can read it out first and then answer it
Sure.
for those who are on audio.
Yep, for a new house with rough-in already in, what is a typical cost for installing a pump system? Does it scale with the size of the basement? So from what I've been told and what I've been, kind of loosely quoting people in the past, is it's about $1,500 to $2,500. I said that earlier that I'm not sure if the prices have gone up or not. And typically the price does not go down if the rough-in is already in place. The rough-in is just basically below the slab. They put some like kind of weeping tile, and then it's tied into this pipe, and then it's capped off. So there's still kind of, most of the cost is labor. And then the piping that's used is also unfortunately not very cheap. And then there's the radon fan. So no, it doesn't really go down in cost, I guess.
Thank you. Okay. Couple minutes. Any final questions, thoughts? And Michael, you can stop the recording if you haven't already. Okay. So I think we usually have 1 hour. We scheduled a little extra time purposely today. Debbie, if